Please join me in welcoming Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison.
Thanks for that very kind introduction. And I gotta give a little shout out to my Minnesota peeps who are here today. Ramsey County Attorney John Choi, Chief Assistant John Kelly, my son's actual supervisor when he worked at the Ramsey County Attorney's Office. Really, thank you so much. And then I can't see all of y'all, so please help me out by putting a hand in the air. There's Josh Larson over there. There's my staff member over there, Aaron. And I think y'all heard from Zuri yesterday. She did a pretty good job? Yeah. All right, good. So on May 25th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 2020, people took to the streets of our city in Minneapolis, and I bet you they took to the streets of Berkeley, and they took to the streets of London and Lagos, and they took to the streets of even places like Tehran, and certainly places like Frankfurt, because they saw this image of this guy in a blue uniform with his knee on the neck of this man. Notice how I didn't talk about the racial differences between the two people. I talked about the official differences between these two people. It did involve color. No doubt our country has a certain racial history. All of us know it. But for the people around the world, and maybe even the most important color differences, was that official blue uniform on top of the body of that civilian person. Because that blue uniform carried with it the imprimatur of authority, state authority. That blue uniform carried with it prestige. And also, it carried with it the highest aspirations of our society, as did that little badge. And in the Floyd prosecution, one of the things that one of our colleagues, now Judge Jerry Blackwell, who's now a federal district court judge, but was a big firm lawyer who came and helped us out on the case, he said, this little badge, small, made of metal, but it carries a lot of weight. And what I'm submitting to you all is, if the people who wear the blue uniforms and carry the badges, and the people who have the public trust, and that includes us, if we can't be trusted to obey the law, how can we possibly expect anybody else to? That is why these prosecutions are critical and important. You know, as you looked out across that week and you saw people in the street, and then even in Minneapolis, we saw folks burn down the 3rd precinct. We saw people in the streets breaking things, breaking glass. It was clear to me that people don't obey the law because they're scared of the police. That's not why. They obey it because they know that stopping at that red light is good for society. If I stop at this red light, and those folks go, and then I get to go, then that's better. People have a fundamental sense that the law serves them, and they will obey it as long as they sense that it does. But once they get the sense that, man, there's no rules around here, the authorities who are in charge they're not legitimate, they don't care about me, they don't even like me, they have contempt for me perhaps. People will act outside of what the law requires of them. Disorder will ensue. And therefore, us as prosecutors really need to understand that there are competing interests here that we have to deal with, but perhaps the most important public interest is the interest of the public to feel safe, and thereby everyone to have to obey the law, including us and the police. And so, look, let me just acknowledge that 800-pound gorilla in the room. A lot of the people who we're talking about prosecuting are our friends and colleagues and people we know well. Am I making up stories up here? This is true. They've gotten evidence for us. They've run down witnesses for us. They've done a good job. We know them. We happen to know that so many of them are, in fact, good people. And yet here we are prosecuting some of them. And they don't like it that much. And if you doubt that, in my last election, the Police Federation spent $3.5 million trying to defeat me. Boy, they came out the wallet on me, boy. That was impressive how they were spending to get rid of me. But I tell you, I knew that, even if I don't win this election, I'll be fine. All of us in the room who are elected, if you don't win, you'll be fine. You're going to go to some law firm. You're going to open up a practice. That might be your dream come true. Now you're going to open the florist shop that you've always wanted to open. But how will the people be if a prosecutor is in office who thinks that getting reelected is the most important thing? How will the people be if the message goes out that if you tangle with members of the police federation, you might just be finding and looking for another line of work? I'm saying that it's worth the risk. I'm saying that you've got to do it in order to make sure that we live in a well-ordered society where people can trust that the law will protect them. I'm saying that you'll be okay, but the people won't be unless you stand up for this rule of law. And let me tell you, the more we do it, the easier it will get. Let me just acknowledge a reality. 10, 20, 30 years ago, it simply wasn't what we were doing. We literally allowed, and I'm not talking about you, I'm not blaming anybody in this room, but I'm talking about as a profession. We allowed a system of impunity to prevail. Let me take an example from south of here, Los Angeles, 1991, 92. Anybody remember that? Bottom line was, what happened to Rodney King was that there was a system of impunity in place. Our criminal justice system has two basic missions. One legitimate and acknowledged, and another one illegitimate and not acknowledged. One is safety, security, rule of law, justice. The other one is maintenance of a vertical hierarchy based on race, sex, sexuality, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Never forget that Stonewall was about police brutality. Don't remember that. Keep it in mind. Keep in mind that what happened in LA and throughout the country in 1991 was about people feeling that the law didn't treat them properly. Keep these things in mind. In fact, you could argue that over the course of American history, this alternative system of maintaining a vertical hierarchy has cost our society tremendous amount in terms of credibility and even wealth and income. Minneapolis, my beloved town, spent $100 million on civil rights police brutality cases over the last 10 years. Now, I know y'all in Berkeley, that's no money at all. But for some of us around the country, that's real money right there. We're thinking in terms of like playgrounds, housing, aging water pipes. We're not spending it on stuff we need. We're just paying out police brutality cases. What if we actually enforce the law so consistently that officers who really do want to do the job, and that is overwhelmingly most of them, and you know it, what if we actually said, we're going to reward good conduct and punish bad when it came to even people in official roles? What would happen over time is you'd see fewer and fewer of these cases. We have such a proliferation. We have Tyree Nichols. We have LaQuan McDonald. We have Breonna Taylor. Because for a long time, we just didn't do anything about this kind of problem. Now's the time. You are chosen for this moment to say, you know what, no more free passes. Everybody has to obey the law these days. And if you do that, I'm telling you, it will be easier to recruit your children to join the police department. It will be easier to get your nephew to join the prosecutor's office because they will deem it as noble work as opposed to feeding into some vertical hierarchy which keeps some with privilege and benefits and others without. People like to argue, well, look, you guys prosecuting the police, that's hurting morale. People don't want to join the force. I'm like, no, not doing it is what's causing that. Because, I have a son and I have myself. And both of us had this conversation where we had this idea that somehow being a public defender was more noble and just and good than being a prosecutor. that's not because of the theoretical construct of those jobs. It's because of the actuality and lived experience of people. But what if we actually enforced the law? What if we really demonstrated concern for victims of crime when the perpetrator of the crime happened to do it under the color of law? Things would change. Let me tell you, in the Floyd case, I want to thank y'all for the kind words you said about me, but I don't deserve them. I'll be very honest with you. I do not. The effort was cumulative, and it wasn't just our team. It was cumulative over time. A very courageous prosecutor saw a situation where a young black man who was nothing but no, I'm not going to put that like that. He was a lunchroom manager for our kids. I almost said that was not a noble job. It is very much so, and you know that. But it's not a grand job. It's a job that just has to be done every day, right? And this guy was beloved, and they called him Mr. Phil. His name was Philando. The first time anyone in the state of Minnesota, any officer in the state of Minnesota was prosecuted for a crime allegedly committed while on duty was when John Choi and John Kelly prosecuted Geronimo Yanez for shooting and killing Philando Castile. Philando happened to have a permit for a gun, and he had one. He announced that he had one. The officer, from the sound of the audio, freaked out and shot him to death. That case did not come out in a conviction. I believe that it should have. But what it did is it opened a door that we walked through. And I want to thank you guys publicly for the good work you did. We read the transcripts of that case. We learned from the transcripts of that case. And then we looked at the case involving a woman named Justine Rushdick, a white woman, immigrated from Australia, heard what she thought was domestic violence going on, called the police, goes out to the alley to try to meet them to talk about what's going on, and then the passenger side officer shoots through an open window past his partner, hits her, and kills her. Now, that was somewhat of a controversial prosecution, but I still thank Mike Friedman very much for that. It was cumulative effort, and Josh, I want to thank you guys for doing that case, and I'll tell you why. It's because that case opened up the idea that you can hold officers accountable. I don't know what really happened in that case, nor does anyone. I do know that use of deadly force on Justine Rushdick was per se unreasonable, and nobody was ever held accountable for it. They were held accountable for it. They were convicted. That officer was convicted, and he escaped third-degree murder, but the manslaughter charge stuck, and man too. And so there again, we go from charging the case but not being able to get a conviction to charging the case, getting a second-degree manslaughter, and then we show up, and the world says, "Oh, great job." Well, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, friends. And if you are standing on the shoulders of giants, then you ought to be able to see a little further than that giant. If all you do is see what they see, then you're not doing your job. You've got to go a little further. You've got to bring it a little longer. And so I just want to say that the community has a great thirst for this kind of accountability. And if I don't know what time, I know there's folks from Georgia here. Where else we got? Don't be shy. I know you guys are lawyers. Come on now.
I made him yell it out earlier.
You got Georgia. I know you got California. You got Arizona. Thank you, Bradley. Little guts right there. Minnesota. Who else? Indiana, Chicago, Colorado. Elijah McCoy. Yeah. Oh my God, Elijah McClain. Right. Washington State. Yep. I was talking to your AG there, and I know you got cases there. And so all over the country, and I can tell you that you know and I know that these cases do rip at the fabric of our communities, and they diminish trust. I talked about how much it cost us in terms of civil rights actions. What does it cost us in terms of civil unrest? In Minneapolis, it might cost us $1 billion when you add up all the broken glass, all the burned down buildings, all of it. It costs us dearly. And then it costs something else. It costs something else that you cannot put a dollar figure on. It costs us trust. I'm going to offer this idea to you. In St. Paul, we have, I think, about a 90% clearance rate for homicide. Am I right? So, get 10 people get murdered, 9 of them are going to get caught and held accountable. In Minneapolis, we got a 30%. And I would argue that it has something to do with strained trust. Somebody heard that woman yelling. Somebody knows about that beef. Somebody knows. We got to build trust so people will come forward and say, I actually heard something and I'm willing to testify. Stronger, greater trust will lead to more effective prosecutions that don't have anything to do with police other than they've investigated the case. But it's got to start with people trusting and believing the system that we have in place. So whether it's civil rights cases, whether it is civil unrest, whether it is trust, all these things are absolutely critical. But there's even one more cost we're paying by not doing these cases. And that cost has to do with democracy itself. Most of us, when we think democracy, what do we think of? We think of what? Voting, right? Well, that's just the kindergarten of democracy. If you voted, you've basically done the bare minimum. Most of what democracy is about is what happens between the elections. Most of what democracy is about is not what the majority wants, but how the minority is treated. The minority gets to say, I happen to disagree with that policy. I think they're wrong. And the government can't do nothing about it because you have a freedom of expression. Well, there's another. I get to be whatever religion I want. You can't punish me because I happen to be a religion that you in power don't happen to like. It is my right to do so. And that is a feature of democracy. Well, the Fourth Amendment is in there too. And what does the Fourth Amendment really mean? We talk about unreasonable search and seizure, right? The government can't do unreasonable search and seizure. What that means to me is that the government cannot engage in irrational, arbitrary violence against the public. And boy, isn't that the basis of any democratic society? If you have a society where somebody under color of law with a badge and a blue uniform can just kick the crap out of whoever they please, you don't live in a democracy. I don't care how many ballot boxes you have. You live in a police state. You don't live in a democratic society. And here's the reality of our country, which I love and say the Pledge of Allegiance with urgent, earnest fervor every time I say it. Our country isn't a democracy and hasn't been a democracy for everybody. We've had a white democracy. And please don't be offended. Who can argue with me before 1968 that we had a two-tiered democracy? Would anybody seriously who knows any history say that that's not true? It was true. The good news is that we are fixing it and we fixed it. But even since the passage of the 1968 Fair Housing Act, which I believe was the end of Jim Crow, even since that time, we've had disparities in every aspect of American life. So for 250 years, we say, you people are property and your land, what are you doing on our land? Get off of it. We're going to put you in these little parts that we don't want. And then for 100 years after that, we said, well, you got to sit in the back. You can't do this job. You got to go to that school. All that stuff. Y'all know what I'm talking about. But ever since then, in '68, we didn't say, oh, it's over now. No, it's not over. Disparities in every aspect of American life still exist among us. And what was legal is now custom. What was legal was custom. You and I are duty bound to continue the drive to build multiracial democracy. You and I are required to say an American is an American. It doesn't matter what skin they're in. And it won't happen by accident. It will happen because some stubborn, unreasonable, hard-headed prosecutors say, nope, we're going to do this. This is what we're going to do. Think about what Jared Fishman was up against in New Orleans. Did y'all read his book? What's the name of your book, man?
Fire on the Levee.
Fire on the Levee.
Available any place you can buy your book.
Anywhere? Anywhere books are sold, friends. He'll even sign one for you. But I mean, this is a police killing in the middle of Katrina where he has to investigate, identify, and hold someone accountable under tremendous odds and chaos. What did you do? You pulled order out of the chaos and gave people in New Orleans a sense that there was something called justice that could be obtained if you just stuck to it and didn't back down. So that might be my cue to shut up. But what I will say to you is it is a noble profession you are a part of. The work that you do to hold people in official authority accountable is noble, good work. Don't worry about your personal circumstances. If somebody's mad at you for upholding the law, then they just mad. That's just the way it is. Don't back down. Be brave. Expect that you will be spoken evil of. Imagine my surprise when I'm watching the Vikings beat Green Bay Packers and I'm clicking on the tube and on comes a commercial. Keith Ellison, he's a friend of all the criminals. There was this commercial that goes, this is a call from a Minnesota correctional facility. Hey, us criminals are all voting for Keith Ellison because he hates the cops as much as we do. I'm like, I'm pretty sure if you're in custody in prison, you cannot vote in Minnesota. Logic and facts notwithstanding. They're gonna run them. They're gonna run them on you. And I don't want y'all to think I'm not upset about it. I actually thought it was pretty funny when I first heard it. But my point is, they're going to do that, and it might sting a little. And when your 9-year-old son says, "Dad, why do you love criminals so much?" You're gonna have to explain a little bit about politics, or shall I say, politricks. Yeah. But that is a price worth paying. Because if you stick to it and you don't back down, and if you apply the law equally, we will live in a society where every American can lift their head up and fully expect to be treated with liberty and justice for all. And that is worth the price, even of your career, my friend. And I put myself in that box. So stand up, do it, keep doing it, don't stop, because on the other side of this mountain is glory.